Very good. All right, welcome aboard, team. We've got an interesting session lined up today. We're going to start off with some introductions. So I'm going to throw that over to you, Mr. Stuart Holtby. Name, rank, serial number, where you from?
Yeah, exactly. So I hail from Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. Say that 3 times fast, and that's you got to be careful how you say Regina, Saskatchewan. My name is Stuart Holtby. I am the co-founder of GetInSync. GetInSync is I guess we call it a VCIO, strategic management software as SaaS as a service. Yeah, we'll talk more about that as we get into it. But yeah, happy to join you guys.
Very good. And Delta, welcome aboard. Why don't
Thank
you
you.
do the same?
Yeah, okay. So Delta Holtby from Regina, Saskatchewan as well. I work at GetInSync as customer onboarding and success. So get you up and running and keep you happy using the tool.
Fabulous. And along with us from our team, we've got none other than Brandy Latimer. Brandy.
Hey, yeah, so my name is Brandy Latimer. I am the Senior Customer Success Manager here with ZenContract. I'm also based in Canada, so Toronto, Ontario, not as much of a tongue twister, Stuart and Delta, but another fellow Canadian here as well.
Good stuff. Thanks for being aboard. My name's Greg Sharp, the founder and CEO of ZenContract. Have had near on 30 years in the MSP industry and now in vendor land since around about 2020. I can see and recognize a couple of the names that have joined us for this meeting. Nice to have you on board. This meeting's obviously recorded, and all those that have registered are going to be sent a copy to the recording. Given the various locales where people are coming in from and time zones and things, we're going to make that available. So today we are really excited to be joined by the team at GetInSync, and we're going to have a look at what is effective contract and agreement management for MSPs, but specifically into an area which is a real expert. We have a real expert on board, rather, is Stuart Holtby in this area of VCIO services, and so we're going to hunker down into those. So, just a little bit of background, Stuart. You've obviously been in this world for some time. You want to give us your slant on that experience handle that you've got?
Yeah, exactly. I jokingly say that we're a 30-year-old startup because we started back in the day before the internet and cell phones. I managed my own. It wasn't really a managed service provider back in the day. More, we were called a reseller. Started in 1989. Actually, I started a little before that, 86, out of my father's chartered accounting firm. Chartered accountants is the same thing as a CPA, certified professional accountant. And the reason that's important is that we started more from a business perspective and really talking about balance sheets, income statements, and those kind of things. And as we grew our practice out of my father's chartered accounting firm, he kicked me out in 89 because he didn't want a whole bunch of computers open and whatnot. By sheer necessity, we had to get into the IT business because payroll was due on Friday and we couldn't get a hold of the IT guy, so we had to fix it ourselves, sort of thing. So that's how we started our business, and that's how we grew up. The reason I'm telling you that is that it's a subtle but important distinction because we took a business approach to IT. We always wanted to focus on IT, how it's going to help the business grow. And really that's revenue and profit and managing risk, right? So those are the three pillars. And of course, risk, managing that as well for MSPs and how you write a good contract. So over the last 30 years, we perfected our approach in terms of helping organizations really have that, if you will, that Klingon translation between business and IT. Often we speak different languages, that the proverbial geeks in suits kind of thing. And so as we worked through it, that's where we came up with the GetInSync approach. And of course, then codified that into a SaaS platform that we offer. So anyway, Greg, I know that you and I met through the Pitch It program 2024. So excited to be aboard. One of the big things that we get a question on always is just how do I write a contract for VCIO? That's something where we connected and started that dialogue. So we'll have more conversation on that as well as we go forward here. So hopefully that teed it up.
Yeah, it does. And look, we would be remit to not get some of the experience and background from both Delta and Brandy. And I think it's suitable to say that they're the glue and the cogs that get both of our sets of customers utilizing the platform. And so, Brandy, do you want to just go first? And what's your role inside ZenContract and how does that fit?
Yeah, so I am the Senior Customer Success Manager / onboarding. So whenever we have new customers that sign with our products, I am pretty much their main point of contact. I always joke that Greg is now shoved aside and I'm the one that kind of helps drive the adoption of the product and making sure that all their contracts are set up and as to why they're using ZenContract and helping them work around those pain points when it comes to setting up contracts to their customers.
Excellent. And Delta?
So yes, my role is very similar to Brandy's. At ZenContract, I am the customer support director here at GetInSync, and I do the same. I am there to onboard. I work with the customer directly to work through any sort of issues they might have. Any questions, I'm the first point of contact.
Fantastic. Thank you. Excellent. Great to have you aboard. My background is 30 years in MSP, even before it was called MSP, and clearly my accent's different to the other people on the call. So I'm based in New Zealand, the other fantastic Canadians. First got involved in writing contracts from an IT context in a large corporate. I was the head of security for a commercial bank in the UK when I was living over there. And then started off running a team that was doing what we now call commit. And we're going to talk about this a bit today. So co-managed IT and putting together a structure around how those services worked, both for insourcing and outsourcing. Then had 25 years in New Zealand building up MSPs and from scratch and putting them together and buying them and separating them and then wrapping them up together and putting them out for sale and getting that sale done. So the last one we sold in 2020, settled in 21. This platform was an incubator. So ZenContract was an incubated product out of a company called Base 2, which we sold to the New Zealand government telco, which is Cordia. And even during that process, actually, it was really interesting that effective contracts and effective contract management nearly doubled the valuation of our business. And so, that's always good to hear, but not everyone's looking to sell their business. Eventually, we're all going to leave our businesses one way, either in a box or by negotiation and a sale. But nonetheless, you get a lot of benefits of operating efficiently and effectively by having good contract management along the way. What are you going to learn today? We've got 60 minutes. We can use all of those, some of those, more of those, whatever we would like. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of understanding the contract process between an MSP as a client, what they currently look like, assessing, improving contract management process for MSPs and clients, and then we're going to have a look at this role of co-managed. And I know it's something that you're seeing a lot, Stuart, in the GetInSync world. Bob Coppage is a friend of mine, wrote a great book around co-managed IT. He's also really good friends with a big Canadian mate, Rob Ray. And so Bob and I used to be flying around a bit by Rob, standing on stages and talking about this co-managed side of things. And it really has taken off. And certainly as our organizations, and I say our being the MS, have matured, and we're starting to look after and augment larger IT teams that are internal, co-managed IT has become a lot more applicable. It's no longer purely all outsourced. You have clients that are all outsourced and you have some clients that are partially outsourced or co-managed. And then we'll have a Q&A session. So let's throw this over to you, to your team there, Stuart.
Sure.
So this is the slide. Where does all the money go? Tell us about it.
So that's the story. I'll just take you back. I remember as we were doing co-managed services, there was a couple of guys on site and they managed the day-to-day, more the desk, the ticketing and so forth. And this company was on a fairly high, it was a financial services firm. It was a fairly high trajectory in terms of growth. And I remember the conversation as if it was yesterday. I was called in. It was a cold February morning. I had to truck over. They wanted to review costs and go over that with their accountant. And that is always one of those questions is, ooh, what's going on kind of thing. And so I came over and I was put into a boardroom that sat like 30 and the quietness of the boardroom and me sitting in there alone, a little intimidating. And then a couple of auditors and accountants came in and they were pretty serious and they got to business right away. And they basically sat down and said, where does all the money go? And of course, I was prepared. I thought I was at least. Spent about 10 minutes recanting where we're spending the money. And they looked down at their papers and they looked up at me and they said, okay, but that's really only a third. Where's the other 2/3 go? And it dawned on me right then and there that if you just forward to the next slide, that we weren't really looking at the thing holistically, and again, the iceberg. And if you were to think of the totality of their IT spend as the entire iceberg, we weren't seeing the entire thing. We were only seeing what we were charging that client. We weren't seeing all of the other initiatives. And in fact, a lot of, even today, what happens is a lot of the expense, over 60%, some say 80%, is under the waterline, and it's all that those subcomponents, speeds, feeds, infrastructure, and that kind of stuff. And these aren't seen by non-IT management. So they often see IT as this big black hole. And with the lineage I spoke of earlier, coming out of my father's chartered accounting firm and thinking more in terms of dollars, we really wanted to change the conversation about, first, we wanted to be able to have that holistic management of their IT and really look at this as a win, because what we didn't know also presented a risk to the client, because a lot of shadow IT and those kind of things, but also missed opportunities for us as well in terms of seeing some of the line of sight to their strategy and understanding where they're going. Most of the stuff that's above the waterline is the highly visible stuff that IT doesn't get invited to work on. And so this is where obviously that's more that virtual fractional CIO role that you want to help play in that space. So the ideas, initiatives, programs that the company has ongoing, for example, they want to increase revenues by 15% or reduce expense by 10%, or maybe they're more eco-friendly. They want to reduce their emissions and so forth like that. So having that kind of thinking along with treating IT as an asset, not as a cost, that's where we spend a lot of our time in terms of really understanding the challenges that the client has. And I don't know, I'll turn it over to you, Greg. Is that kind of giving the teeing it up?
It is. And we always talked about aligning the technology spend to the business drivers. Now, just bear in mind, we were coming at this from a not nearly as a sophisticated standpoint as you. We were a little MSP that grew a bit bigger. We got some bigger clients. We had some account managers that we gave them a framework. I wish we had GetInSync back then, but we didn't, going back those days. It was basically a little framework that said, ask about the business drivers. Do you want to grow? Do you want to increase top line revenue? Do you want to streamline your staff and get rid of some staff costs? What are these business drivers? And then let's relay that back down to how does technology play a part in those? Potentially, if they want to streamline some staff costs, do we need to, in today's terms, do we need to bring in some AI augmented workloads? Do we need to bring in technology that can do that job? And then we can start to assign some budgets to those things and some times and milestones. And I'm thinking that yours is a much more sophisticated, best-in-class process to follow that's still hitting some of those high notes. Am I right? Is find out what the business wants to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And going back to that boardroom meeting, it dawned on me that often clients are a little bit unawares, if you will, about, what technology is. In this instance, it was anything that plugged into the wall, I mean, like photocopiers, you name it. That's a little unfair, but it does take a big chunk out of their budget. So they're looking at it, where can they save some money? So that's, again, that proactive role that you're talking about, strategic drivers, business drivers, and that kind of thing. But it also meant that you're starting to inherit SLAs, like service level agreements. You're starting to really look at, you mentioned co-managed a little earlier. You're starting to really understand even the staff costs to operate their technology. Sure, they might save money on the subscriptions, say for the SaaS software or something like that, but now you've got 3 people that are heads down hammering away. So how much money have you really saved? So it's trying to take that holistic idea and look at it in that strategic idea. Like you said, the business drivers and understanding where they're going. I'll just recant a quick story too, just they had an all hands meeting at another client, and we were sitting there listening, and the CIO wanted to reduce his carbon footprint by 15% or so. And as I was walking back to again, co-managed, walking back with a couple of the IT fellows, one guy commented, he said, that's an hour of my life I'll never get back. And I'm like, dude, he just gave you the secret sauce of how to actually fund some of your projects. And we get back and look at the whiteboard and I said, how about that vehicle maintenance system that you've been trying to fund for the last 18 months? If you could reduce the emissions from vehicles, putting in technology, you'd probably get funded. And it's that thinking, how do you interconnect what seemingly doesn't look like it's connected? Once you start looking at it, it's, yeah, why didn't I think of that? But really, it's about connecting the dots to that particular strategic driver. We want to be more eco-friendly. Okay, maybe we can reduce paper and put in a document management system. Again, the fleet maintenance system and so forth and so on. So these are all things that you can interconnect between those initiatives and actually spin up projects. And in fact, we wrote a 3-page little document and he improved the vehicle maintenance thing right on the spot that they were trying to get funded for, like I say, 18 months. So it's those kind of things, those kind of interconnections that make all the difference. So
before we jump into the contract process, I think that's golden nugget number one is a CIO at a corporate has to run the budget. So a VCIO from an MSP supplying VCIO services should be thinking of the budget, and most do not. I think that's a really important thing. If you're listening to this or you've got it further on, certainly in the follow-up documents that you'll get from us, budget is going to play a reasonable part. Not just budgeting what that company is going to spend with you over the course of the next however long. Look at the IT budget in totality. Exactly what you're saying, Stuart, is get a holistic view across everyone's spend. You immediately become more relevant in the discussion than if you're just talking about your own slice of the pie. So exactly. Jump out front and get in control of the whole pie. You're not divvying it up and you're not getting a larger slice, but you can at least be the most organized person in the room and run the meeting effectively. So that would be my golden nugget number one. And I'm sure, I'm stealing a bit of your thunder. That's exactly what you were saying, Stuart. So good point.
Yeah, perfect.
So to that end, we're going to go through the contract process. Certain things that you need to be aware of when you are interfacing with an organization in any shape or form. Before we get into a VCIO specific contract, we need to have a look at what is the master services agreement considerations. These are applicable across any time you're doing some work with your customers. You need to have a look at scope and definitions. What is the work that is actually being asked to being done? We're going to supply you with a VCIO proposal, which has the whole scope and definitions outlined. Should you would like a copy of that, all you need to do is, if you're listening to this later on or listening to it right now, and just email through to Brandy@ZenContract.com and she's going to send a copy back to you. And Brandy's never heard that before, that's why she's got a surprised look on her face. But that's where it'll go. Normally Joanna, but Joanna's off sick with COVID. I didn't even know COVID was still running around, but I think
exactly.
We've got the last remnants of it here in New Zealand somewhere. Mind you, Joe's just been in Bali, so I might have got it from there. So scope and definitions are incredibly important, right? So your standard service level agreement. Now, this is applicable to any interaction. We haven't got to the VCIO services yet. So you should have in there around, if it's a P1, we're going to respond within 30 minutes. If it's a P2, it's 4 hours. That's type of what is the construct of your service level agreement. Payment terms, of course. This is a big one. Payment terms has been pretty much a given. What happens if you don't pay us? Is there an extra percentage of interest that gets applied? Those types of standard terms and conditions. But this is one I wanted to talk about a little bit with you, with your expertise, is around client responsibilities. This is something that I've seen over the course of my, I call it a career, certainly a few decades of tenure doing the job, is the more specific you are about who's responsible for what, then clarity plays a massive role in these types of engagements, and spending a little bit of time on really dialing down what is the client responsible for and what happens if they don't do it. Is that something, I frame that in a way where it's very hard for you to say no, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, here again, it's so important, it's critical that the success of the VCIO partnership, and again, this is really fractional CIO partnership, virtual, whether you're on site or whether you play a role virtually, is really important. And then this comes back to some of that, what I mentioned earlier, the service level agreement, those kind of things. But it hinges on that active collaboration to try and ensure that clients understand their role in providing this kind of, if you will, timely information back to the CIO, so that we can have those strategic discussions. Often, sometimes your strategy needs a strategy. It's trying to get an IT strategy. You need that client participation in their actual business strategy. So don't talk to me about the speeds and feeds and the wires and pliers. Talk to me about where your business is going. So that's really the client responsibility there. And in our framework and in our processes, we have what we call the 8 8s, and we can talk about that more. It really doesn't talk about the tool. It doesn't talk about the software. It's really about your responsibilities, your roles, and it's pretty much laid out for the client to tell you, the VCIO, all of the things that are important. Now, you're going to have to suss some of that out anyway in terms of meeting with some of the stakeholders and business leaders within the organization, but you really want to have in writing somewhere that they are going to commit at some sort of cadence some time with you. So whether that be an hour a week, or there'll be some sort of level set meeting and so forth. And we like to call them agreements because it's not engraved in stone, but at the very least, you've got that kind of framework that you can rely on. So you're going to have those touch points. And that's where partly where Delta comes in somewhat in terms of working with, we call it the now, later, never approach in terms of the planning that the client has to do. So there's a laundry list, whether we do it now, later, or never going to do it. But those all feed into the framework that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, client responsibilities, huge. Where we see the most success is when people actually follow that framework and that routine, the method that we have in place to be able to have that cadence and really put people to work. And that's where this just starts to blossom.
These last three we're just going to fly through because that couldn't stand to reason really around you'd need to have a definition in your master services agreement. If you could take these MSA considerations and just put them into a VCIO agreement under your terms section if you were just interacting with them on that front.
Yeah.
Typically, we're talking about MSPs who are supplying VCIO services over and above everything else they do. But confidentiality and data, you need to understand as to what you talk about is obviously in Chatham House rules, it's behind closed doors. And if you would ever use it or leak it or anything like that, you are going to be liable. So you'd need to make sure that's there. Who owns the IP? And this is important. If we can't agree, what process are we going to follow, i.e. dispute resolution? Those are important things to have. Now, moving on to the more specific things that are around supplying VCIO. I think this is the nuts and bolts of what people will be listening to this podcast / webinar for. So, roles and responsibilities. So I'm going to basically throw this over to the expert, Stuart. Given your background, I've certainly got some things to say, having supplied these services and been in as a VCIO and a CIO for large and small corporates. I've got some things to say, but I want to extract out of you as much as we can. So definitions of roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, we killed that on the last slide, but roles and responsibilities, massive. One of the things that was often pointed out, and this is where the culture really makes a difference. Depending on the culture that you're in within that environment, sometimes it can be, you don't want to necessarily pen a whole bunch of roles and responsibilities and come up with a racy chart and that kind of thing. In other environments, it's very important to have that. I don't know if you're familiar with what RACI means. It's an acronym for roles, accountability, consulted and informed, responsible, accountable, consulted and informed. And basically that just gives a high level what we're going to do, how we're going to help you, what your responsibilities are and stuff like that. Now we do deploy those kind of assets so that people have a clear understanding of what's going on. But sometimes that might be a little heavy-handed. So again, it goes back to that culture. If you're really trying to get into and collaborate with the exec teams, the other thing you have to really do is lead. And I'm going to kill a sacred cow here. You're going to have to lead with their business. And what I mean by sacred cow is that VCIO often is combined with QBRs, quarterly business reviews. And we believe that is more self-serving. And sometimes it's a kind of a veiled attempt of selling. And if you do that, you won't be invited back into the exec room kind of thing. It's not about you. Don't be selfish. Make sure that you're coming in with the businesses, providing value to the business and learning about the business itself. So those are really specific things that you have to do. So although I know this is more about the agreement, it's also about the culture, making sure that you're coming in, like I say, leading with the business. That's kind of part of it. Then the rest of it is making sure that in that roles and responsibilities, I'm not sure, Greg, how much I know that you're in Australia and whatnot, but how much you intersect with the new compliance, some of the standards that are being set by the FCC, where folks have to designate a cybersecurity person and some of the compliance issues that are around that. So those are important to bubble up in terms of some of the roles there. The other roles are like application owners. You mentioned earlier a little bit about data and data owners. So that's important to also have flagged in some of these agreements. I don't want to make it sound really onerous, but you have to, again, back to that culture, you have to know who's who in the zoo and be able to really pinpoint. When we say owners, we're talking about application owners. So this is something that might be new to some of the people on the call here in terms of VCIO role. We really take that holistic view of their technology. So when I say holistic, it's also looking at their applications. So those are the line of business applications, the CRM systems, the manufacturing systems, even metering systems and stuff like that. So all of those systems go into it, and we need to know who those application owners are. And so as part of that bubbles up into the consideration of your agreement. Being able to have access to those people is very important. Sometimes if you haven't said that in the executive meeting, people are like, why am I talking to you? So really getting that, if you will, air traffic control to do your job. And again, agreement, contract, this is the statement of work. This is the different names for basically the same thing. And then of course, there's a number of other things, but go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, there's a self-leveling mechanism for how large an organization that we're going to be involved with, right? Exactly. So I think we should talk about that, because 300, 400, 500, 600 person organization is likely to have their own CIO.
Correct.
And so it wouldn't be requiring VCIO services. However, I have seen it where they've got a CIO, whatever, that just needs a bit better backup and someone to come in and provide some governance and controls, and they have a framework, and you can certainly augment that way. But largely you're going to be with, it's medium in Canadian and American terms is different than where we are, but let's call it, for argument's sake, a 200 person business that has all of those roles, but not a VCIO. They might have a head of infrastructure or a head of IT, but no one with the experience around running the virtual CIO role. And so that's probably as complex as you're going to get. And even at that stage, you do need to look at it holistically. You need to think about the budget. You need to think about having an agreement with these types of considerations, because you are coming in as the most organized person in the room. You need to come in there with, this is the way things are done in corporates and best in class, but we're going to keep it simple, but we need to still touch on these types of areas. Who's going to be involved? Who are we going to collaborate with? Let's put in the agreement who we're going to have access to. How often are we going to have access to them? When they keep saying, no, I can't make that meeting, and you're not getting the information you need, at least you've got something to go back to. You've been contracted by the business to get access to that person. And that's the point that we're making, is that we need to touch on each of these things and have it organized in our agreement. You can obviously make the definition of each of these areas smaller and smaller, the smaller the organization is that you are working with. But I think you should at least have these areas covered. So the next one would be important to jump onto, KPIs. That's just, how are we going to be successful? What is our statement of success? Is it completing a project? Is it completing a project on time within budget? Is it a report that goes back to the CEO that's got all green ticks on it? In your experience, Stuart, this is obviously extremely important into us retaining these ongoing services, or at least being successful, is measuring how we're going to be successful.
Yeah, it's always a tough one. And back to the comment about how the culture, in terms of KPIs or ROI or whatever, what's the ROI of having flowers in the boardroom? I think sometimes it's a very difficult thing to draw up why it's important to spend money on things like that. But having said that, the KPIs, what we are seeing is a bit of a trend in terms of, especially in the co-managed side of things, in terms of how you bill for your service, there can be a performance component to the VCIO, whereby you can start putting in, you get a bonus if you're reducing certain costs. You get a bonus if you're hitting targets and so forth like that. The KPIs and managing those and having those defined are very important, and they should always be time bound and of course metric bound. We're going to reduce overall IT costs by 10% within 24 months. Something like I say, it's time bound and it's also got a percentage value. Of course, in order to do those kind of things, you have to have a really good baseline and so forth. So those are kind of the pieces that I'd be on the watch for.
Great. There's other couple of main ones here. I don't know if we need to go into each of them because obviously project sign off, obviously that goes without saying. Let's get a signature and agree that things have been done. But change management is one that pops out to me that I've seen both in these agreements or referring to an existing other change management procedure that's out there. But I think it's incredibly important to have in this because the VCIO is going to be affecting change. And you need to be empowered to either have the team members to get the change done, or you need to be empowered to get the change done yourself. So yeah, just your comment on that change management.
Yeah,
so
it's very important to, again, and I know I keep banging on this culture part. Often though, what I've found is that we're a little timid, MSPs in general, and that makes us more of an order taker. And why is that important with change management? You sometimes have to have that dad talk with the senior management, and that's where the change management will be successful. If someone comes to you with a list of 20 projects to be done in 6 weeks, you have to sit down and say, look, right away, I'm going to fail. So and they're going to what? And insist on having that rigor in terms of change management and project management. Those go, of course, hand in glove. And understanding that who's in charge of actually shooting rats, I call it. Often there'll be a pet project or two that's not in line with your business drivers. And you really need that champion to come in with you and be able to have that dad talk, like I say, with those pet projects and prioritize those things. So it all comes down to that whole prioritization. I know that some of this is rather obvious, but it's the execution that gets how you're going to execute that. What is our change management policy and procedure? How, if it's not written down, or for example, in a system like GetInSync or whatnot, it doesn't exist. Because what will happen is these things will come out of the blue, and that'll throw your change off.
I maintain that it's actually the completeness of these agreements up front that is what puts you into the driver's seat, right? Because before doing this exercise and working with Ali that helped me put this together, I'd never thought about putting into the agreement collaboration and of the exec team, or who do we get access to. So having that in the agreement, those types of things, and you've heard me say this 100 times, like you in culture, as being the most organized person in the room is part of what makes you successful, and having that into the agreement. All right, on to the next 100%. Section. So actually, before we leave that, if anyone listening to this, please email brandy@ZenContract.com. We will get you a copy of a VCIO specific agreement considerations, but it's a template for the proposal of services. It covers all of these particular areas and very quickly will allow you to get up to speed. It is available in the marketplace in ZenContract. Of course, I have to put that plug in there, and it's as easy as adding it into your tenant and sending it off. All right, next section, assessing and improving. So back to you, Stuart, like in the role of, let's use a worked example. You're providing VCIO services. You're 6 months into a year-long contract. It's working, and you're getting some of the things across the line. You've got access to people. You've got your KPIs there. What's the role of assessing and improving, and how does that normally go about? And potentially, I know it's a 3-part question, but how do we work that into the agreement?
Yeah, this is where you start to actually have to have the buy-in in this sense of first the access to the business, like you just mentioned, being able to have that like buy-in. I can't say it in any other way, but it's really about creating that two-sided marketplace, if you will, in terms of improvements, assessing improvement. So The very first thing is using our framework and whatnot, and going into the client, is that you almost have to re-onboard them. I know that sounds a little bit ominous, but we have a process that does it fairly quickly. And so then you get that actual baseline. So what's your baseline? So how can you improve unless you know what the baseline is? And so those are the kind of the elements that you really need to put in place. You need those tools. So maybe some project management tools. And obviously, like I mentioned earlier, the regular check-in, whether that be on a cadence that you agree to, but it's also, there should be no surprises. This whole idea of a quarterly business review, there should be an ongoing dialogue and a dashboard, and you should be able to know where you're at any one time. And I always say it's important because an executive will come in and say, "How's it going, team?" And how do you answer that? Do you just smile and, "Oh, it's going good"? Or do you take that as an opportunity at that particular moment, saying, "We have 15 projects, of which 9 are green, 3 are yellow, and 2 are red"? No, did I do the math right? But anyway, but the point is that the intention here is that now I've just given you something because I have a dashboard that I'm not just going to have that smile and nod kind of conversation. "Oh, it's going great. Yeah." That's not helpful. So then he might or she might lean in and say, "Wait a minute, 2 are red, and how many are yellow?" And then you can then show them that how you're assessing. And then how can they help right now with that, because it's real time. And so it's, we had this additional scope added to that project back to your change management. And that's put us off in terms of delivering, and that's why it's turned red. And again, it's just that quick metaphor that anybody can understand: green, yellow, red. And so it's, okay. And so hopefully that person leans in and says, "How can I help?" You can tell marketing that they're not going to be able to blah, 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 or whatever that might be, that you need to be able to put things back on track.
Without that, Stuart, you're in the gun for during that period. At least if you're working on this stuff for VCIO services is an ongoing, it's a long term, it's not a 2-week engagement, right? It's a long, but the business drivers might change in that time. And if you're not ready with the relevant information, like you said, 9 green, 3 yellow, yes, 2 red, whatever. Yeah. Now you're in the gun, right? You are likely, if not more than likely than not, to be deemed as irrelevant because you're not providing the right information, and so you potentially, your costs could get chopped if that's the requirement of the business at that time. It is really important to have that framework agreed upfront when your engagement. They will want that too. They're going to see you as the most organized people providing these services. If you have some sort of traffic light system or reporting system, and this is how they'll get the information about how you are proceeding, they'll probably more than likely want to see that on a monthly, if not weekly basis, to see how the money's being spent. Are we actually achieving what we're setting out to achieve? All of those things. So exactly. Really important.
And this goes to retention, and everything that's in GetInSync is somewhere along the line a life lesson in my last 30 years. So you come up to renewal and you're meeting with the people that, "Yeah, we went with someone else." So, "What? How come?" "Oh, that project that pooped the bed on." And we did. So it's not only customer facing, but it's also internally facing to your MSP. It's what? "We've got 2 red. Help me get those back." So it's a collaborative. Yeah.
You're right, actually, because a lot of the time you are going to be playing a slightly removed role of managing the MSP to get these things done, because a lot of the time they're the engine room to get these projects across the line.
Yeah, and it's all about retention and furthering and again, like I say, that advisory, that holistic advisory role. And you can play advocate on both sides. The dad talk with the customer, and of course the dad talk back internally into your organization, so that, yeah, it's that traffic caught. And that becomes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, my golden rule when supplying these services was somehow in the first couple of meetings, find a way for the business to save money, regardless of whether it was at the cost of the MSP or not, because you would be setting a precedent that you are there as a advocate for the business, which will drive a long-term relationship with the MSP, right? And they're paying you to provide these services. So the business is going to win long-term anyway. But your mental state needs to be, I'm in there as an advocate to get the business drivers done. Okay. And the MSP, albeit that I work for the MSP, they're just one of the cogs in my wheel. They're the set of doers that are going to get these jobs done, but I need to have a larger holistic view of, as we've said a number of times. All right, next role is into co-managed. Why don't you go through a little bit of a definition of what co-managed is?
Co-managed, and this is, again, maybe another sacred cow we might be killing. To me, that's how I grew my practice. I was always in the co-managed space. And again, I go back to the whole chartered accounting thing and whatnot. But there was always IT people that we would want to collaborate with on site. And particularly now with various generations that, like I said, I started before the cell phone. My grandkids, they can't imagine a life without a cell phone. Having said that, you're getting more and more experienced people on site. So what is co-managed? It's people that can do things to a certain level, in my view, and then strategically, they can't go any farther. I know that some co-manage is like, oh, take over the help desk. That could be, but in my definition, it's more the strategic side. So allow the organization internally to provide if you go levels, level 1, 2, and 3 or whatnot, within the organization, and you're coming in as that strategic person, that, like you say, the fractional, the VCIO type role, and providing that oversight of both the internal IT folks, but also the services that the MSP might be providing. And typically we see those roles being those services that are highly complex, right? So cybersecurity being the number one thing these days. But there's the other types of services that the MSP can and will provide that internal IT folks just can't scale there. They just can't go there. And then the contract side of things is more you're augmenting their IT staff. It's always a little bit, again, back to culture. Sometimes you come in and you're actually helping manage that IT department, and they would then report up to the VCIO. We see that as probably one of the more, how would I put it, more successful approaches, because then the virtual CIO is also defending those people to management. I'll often, like back to you say, IT gets stuck in the middle of the bun war. And I talk about bun wars being like sales and marketing fighting over, marketing wants HubSpot and sales wants whatever, Salesforce. And IT gets caught in the middle of this line of fire. Senior management don't really know that's going on. Who's going to resolve that? And the IT guys are like, just pick a ditch, and they end up having to wear a referee's outfit kind of thing to try to referee the culture problems. And so back to the role of the contract is to try and put yourself in that place that you have authority and some teeth to this co-managed environment. And that gets a little more sophisticated, but what we've also seen is the IT people like it because they have a voice at that level to management, where perhaps in the past they've been excluded from some of that. I don't know what your views are on that, Greg.
Well, I'm coming at it from more of an MSP role. So I've seen bottom up where we had a big bus company in our country, and our MSP took over their level 1 help desk, right? So then the big thing comes. This would be my big golden nugget piece of advice in co-managed is understanding where the handover is. So when it goes from level 1 to level 2, what does the handover look like? How is it performed? And this would be the main thing, is give examples of types of tickets where that piece of work goes from here to here. Now, you're not going to get that so much in the nuances of your strategic side of things, but I've also seen it when Datto came into our world and was very big on basically starting this co-managed movement in the world of backup and disaster recovery. Is where did the backup start and stop? How are they tested? Who's responsible for which ones? So if your co-managed is in disaster recovery, be really deliberate about where the handover is of services and the handback, and provide an example of a type of ticket or couple of tickets or whatever where that would be the case, because then both teams, again, it comes back to clarity, like we were talking about. Yeah. Both teams get 100% clarity around what happens here, and because what you're trying to avoid is where things get stuck in a no man's land ditch, and then all of the process breaks down.
Yeah. You're highlighting a really good point, and that is what's the stack? Often, too, when you're brought into a co-managed environment, you're probably inheriting some of that. I've seen it both ways, where you do the get the forklift out and rip and replace, but I wouldn't advise that, and I also wouldn't advise any sort of change to their org chart and within the IT department, at least for the first 6 months. Try to embody what's there, and then slowly, it's evolution, not revolution kind of approach. That way you win over a lot of the IT guys too that are on site that you're co-managing with. You don't want to be seen as an outsider, and that's always dangerous. We've had some experiences with other organizations that kind of come in and try to throw their weight around. And then the organization, that it doesn't help. You start to talk about bun wars, you start to have more of that kind of, but yeah, the approach, as much as you can put in a contract, again, it's trying to define, like you said, the roles and responsibilities. Where's the handoffs? And that's really that's key.
That's the key thing. So there's also co-managers is really actually quite wide, but it is at an anthropological level. It's about humanizing the business and getting yourself involved in that team, getting yourself accepted in that team, making sure that your decisions are respected without being seen to feather your own company nest.
Exactly.
That's really key.
Yeah.
And it can be bottom up, top down, sideways agreements. What I mean by that is it might be that you're taking over level 1 help desk so that their on-site engineers, level 2 and 3, can start doing projects. Yep. It can be the other way around. That is that you're taking over the level 2 and 3 projects so that they can concentrate on getting rid of all of their tickets and just getting that horsepower done and improving their service levels that way. I've seen that successful as well. The side agreements are the things like backup and disaster recovery. Like IT Partners Plus in the US, it made a whole business originally out of just doing that for co-managed teams all over the States, and did it extremely well. And that is around the clarity of who is testing what and how often are we doing it, and really defining that touch point, whether it's top down or bottom up or sideways, honing in on where are we handing over and handing back, and making sure that both teams have got complete clarity and are set up for success, and how are we going to measure that success is incredibly important.
Big time.
Cool. Solutions. So we get to talk about ourselves for a little bit. Starting with us. So ZenContract, built out of an MSP to simplify the process of managing contracts, both creating templatization, e-signatures, automatically building contracts into PSAs. But ultimately, in today's context, it is a very simple way of electronically managing contracts, all the way from templatization to getting them out, negotiated, signed, stored in the right place, and automatically built into the PSA. Then managing the process of renewals, because obviously contracts have a start date and an end date. And when they are moving towards the transition of expiring, we need to make sure that the right people are informed, and so that they can have the conversations around either repricing or just continuing at the same price if that's what you decide to do. Obviously, that's not recommended in an inflation rate, and you can then have a conversation about adding auxiliary services or putting optional services that you put forward, so you could add that into the contract that you're providing. So all that lifecycle management contract specifically built for MSPs and integrated into the PSA. That is where ZenContract comes from, and where it sits, helping hundreds of MSPs all over the globe now get that stuff automated. So that is us in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Over to you, Stuart.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. We talked a lot about it, but really what it does is it's a SaaS product that creates a two-sided marketplace, if you will. So it exposes all what we talked about just now, is giving that transparency to where we're at. And that means just those gaps between the technology and the business goals, having a clear line of sight to what the strategy is, the IT strategy. Of course, it tracks spending, so it has all of the costs directly linked, and it's linked back to the business strategy. And that's not just the projects, and it's not just the applications, it's also the IT infrastructure, complete life cycle management there. It shows the technical debt. It really helps you as that strategic enabler to change the conversation from a cost to an asset and really treat technology like it should be. It should be treated like an asset, just like any asset. And of course, that helps contribute to the overall achievement of their business objectives. And it also puts the business owners in that direct decision-making chair, if you will, in terms of replacement of technical debt. Technical debt is a big deal nowadays as systems age, and to try to keep up, particularly now in an age of AI and all this other stuff that's coming. So that's really, it's primarily understanding all of the pieces of the organization and getting in sync. That's really what it's all about.
Fantastic. And I'm going to make some guesses here and tell me if I'm right or wrong, but it provides a best-in-class framework that you can start to follow from day one, right? And so
exactly,
you might have technical expertise, you might have the ability to be able to work with corporate execs, but this will give you the framework to make you look organized, act organized, communicate effectively, track all the information, and then provide the reports that you need. And so you don't need to build your own process. Why not get one that's best in class based on years and decades of expertise that's being tested and tried and true by lots of MSPs and jump on board, right? Is that a good statement?
Exactly that. And the process, the framework, the method it's all, if you will, tucked away. So you don't have to, we can meet you where you're at, is what I'm trying to say. And it's not overwhelming. You can get started right out of the gate. And that's the thing that's so important about the VCIO role, is showing results within 14 days kind of thing. So then people are like, now I get it kind of thing. So
precisely, yeah. That's how we describe ours, Stuart, as decades and decades of MSP contract lifecycle management when there wasn't any, when we should have had some. And we've now taken that and simplified it and put it into a best-in-class software as a service platform that's easily accessible and highly affordable. Comes with a myriad of templates and that can get you started from straight out of the box.
So important nowadays, especially with the lawsuits and the crowd strikes and all the things going on.
Yeah. But as far as offers and next steps for us, we at ZenContract, we've got a discounted subscription. So we're this month actually, and we're going to carry it on to next month. So you get Zen Ultimate for the price of Zen Master. You're going to get this free VCIO proposal template. That will be anyone that emails in from listening to this webinar / podcast / information hour. And that will be across both GetInSync and Zen as well. And with that VCIO proposal template can come in PDF format, and we can get it into a Word document. Also, it's available in the marketplace in ZenContract itself. And we're giving away $500 Zen toward professional services. So we have amazing legal services, design services to allow people to get their MSP contracts up to speed and then into the platform. So that's the Zen offer in front of you. If you happen to be watching, you can scan that. It'll take you straight to a demo booking. And over to you.
Yeah, it's the same thing, 1-2 punch. Essentially, we will be waiving the onboarding fee if you join up. A partnership is free. Join as a GetInSync partner. Delta will be happy to help you there. It's always been free, but we will waive the onboarding. And yeah, you can get in as low as like $10 per client per month with GetInSync, and we invite you to come in and have a demo, particularly for those folks that want to move into that co-managed space, have hit that, how would I put it, that ceiling where you're at that, you've been hovering at maybe the 2 million ARR mark. This will bust through and take you to, the sky's the limit, can take you to the $10 million pretty rapidly. So we'd love to have that conversation, and yeah, reach out to Delta or myself for sure. And that code there will also scan and get you to where you need to be.
Fantastic. Very good. Q&A.
Look at that.
Brady,
we're right on time. Holy.
I know. We managed to land it. That's pretty good. Brady, any questions in there? Or I think we can provide a framework where people can just send through questions to stuart@getinsync.ca, if I've got that correct, Stuart?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, or Delta
Stuart,
at GetInSync.
STUART, yep.
Yep. And my email address, greg@zencontract.com, brandy@zencontract.com. So any of those questions that come through, we've done a few of these webinars. There's always a few follow-up questions and people are looking for bits of information. That's the way to get a hold of us. Back to the screen there for those demo bookings. And thank you very much, Delta and Stuart, for taking the time to join us. Really good to have a chat. I think it was informative. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Certainly gets my brain thinking back to some of the meetings that we had. I wish we had some of the systems that we have now. But anyway, it was great to talk to you both.
Exactly.
Yes, thanks, Greg.
And you too. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much, Brandy.